Welcome back, everyone. Now we're having Tim O'Brien from Drift. And, just to keep you entertained, this session is not going to be a typical session. Tim requested that it has to be, something different. So we're having an interview. So here we go. Let's kick off the interview. First of all, Tim, please tell us a little about yourself. How did you end up being a director of product design at Drift? What did your career path look like?
Yeah, sure. Hey, everybody. I was just waving, but I guess I'm on video. So, I grew up in Boston, in the suburbs of Boston, Massachusetts, in the U.S. And as a result, there wasn't a ton to do. So besides like playing Dungeons and Dragons with my friends, another thing we did was we made websites for fun. And I think the primary motivator was that my high school allowed us to skip a period when I was a junior to make the high school website. So that's when I really doubled down. I knew this was for me. But then I went to college and I studied something completely different. I studied business and sociology, still in the Boston area. And then after that, I, looked around and there weren't a ton of sociology jobs. So I kind of went back to that thing I used to do as a kid, making websites, and found this thing called web design. So I started off in Providence. I worked at this really small design agency. We actually focused primarily on print design, but I was brought in because I knew computers. That was a big deal at the time to be able to properly use Photoshop, and then also have some opinion on the way that websites should look. So that was my first job, and then from there, I kept teaching myself enough about front-end development and design, and eventually I got a job at TripAdvisor. So that was my first real big company job, and I was in charge of designing and building their emails. Which was pretty exciting for me. Earlier in my career, those emails went out to a couple million people a week. So I thought that was the peak of everything I had to do with design. I thought I had made it. But then after a couple of years of sending emails, I guess I got a little bit bored of sending the same emails. So I went to go work at startups. Went to 2 startups, then ended up at LogMeIn, which is a bigger company, which is where I had my first position as director of design. I was the head of design there briefly for a design team of about 70 people. And then after that, I kind of got sick of the big company thing, so I went back to a smaller company, Drift, and here I am.
Okay, that's not such a long trip, but very successful, isn't it? So tell us more. What does Drift do, and what's your role there as a director of product design?
Sure. So we're what's called a conversational marketing platform. We actually invented that category here. So what we do is we help businesses connect with customers who are ready to buy. So the traditional business-to-business selling motion is that you fill out a form and wait. But what Drift aims to do is when people are engaging with either your website or on emails or videos that you send them, we aim to connect you with those buyers right away. So we have 4 products that help you do that. We have a chat product, which is probably what we're most well known for, chat and chat bots. We have an email product, a video product, which is amazing. And the most recent launch is an automation product, which is artificial intelligence that connects those channels together. So I came here a year and a month ago as a director of design. The team is 8 wonderful designers. I think some are listening right now. Hello, wonderful designers. And 1 fantastic UX researcher. I call her our UX research department, but she's so great that we only need 1 of her. And so our job is to support those 4 products as they grow.
Okay. So designing for AI, is it new for you? Slightly new?
Yeah, it's new and intimidating. The person who heads up our AI labs is named Dr. Jeff Orkin, and he's named that because he has a doctorate in conversational artificial intelligence from MIT. So that's a very intimidating person to work with. Luckily, he's a very humble person and very nice to work with. And he takes time to explain what he's talking about to us.
Do you address him as doctor?
Only jokingly. He gets like embarrassed when you say Dr. Jeff. But yeah, he's great.
Okay, so when you are developing the product, the Drift product, what are your key focus points? How do you build a product roadmap in Drift?
Yeah, sure. So I'll probably refer to this a few times, but Drift is based on these leadership principles. I think the most important one that applies to our product organization is put the customer at the center of everything you do. So that's one of our principles. And we try to live up to that by, it's ambitious to say, but we try to be the most product or customer-focused product organization in the world. So we spend as much time as possible interacting with our customers, listening to them, getting feedback. We have all sorts of ways that we can do that. Luckily, we are a platform of engagement, so we can do that via chat very easily. But we also listen to calls that our sales team is having, listen to calls that our customer team is having. And then also with our UX research department that I mentioned, running usability tests often and spending time doing generative research to figure out what problems are. So our real goal is to never be working on something that's not a real customer problem. So a lot of organizations will mess this up and they'll work on things that maybe their competitors have launched recently, or maybe things that are good for they think are good for their market, and they can get lost along the way. But really the ultimate goal here is to deliver value to customers. So we say that we don't have roadmaps, we have customer goals and outcomes. Okay. And one of our product managers said it best. He says, we let them pave the path. So yeah, we try not to have this long list of features that we want to ship. We have this long list of kind of like customer problems that we've seen, potential solutions to those problems, outcomes that we want our customers to achieve.
Yeah, well, I've just once heard this quote that design is resolving the problems, finding solutions to problems.
Yeah.
So it's
like
that, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that we try to avoid that classic pitfall of like solution without a problem, because and we've messed up before, but it doesn't ever feel good when you build something, even if it's beautifully designed and really easy to use. If no one's using it, it doesn't matter.
Exactly. Okay, so my next question to you is, what is the most important to you and your design team when creating a product? Well, you just somehow covered that before, but just, if you could just like list it for our listeners.
Yeah, sure. Sure. So another one of our leadership principles is this push for high standards. The way that we kind of live up to that is, as a design organization, we really try to push our product and engineering counterparts to deliver these like unbelievable experiences to our customers. So like product in general, like focuses on big things, like big customer problems maybe that haven't been solved yet. Sometimes they'll be thinking about features or big outcomes, but a lot of times these like really small things slip through the cracks that really irritate me, really irritate our customers. They come up, but aren't big enough that we're going to put them into some sort of product roadmap. And I love this article by Stuart Butterfield, the founder of Slack, where he's writing an article to all of Slack when they're about to launch. And he talks about these things called petty irritations. So they're these like really tiny things that if it wasn't your product, you wouldn't put up with. Like if you're using Slack, you'd probably be vocal about them, but you kind of give yourself a break. You're like, the alignment's bad, or like the color's a little bit off, but like whatever, like, it doesn't bother me. And he said, like, in order for us to be successful, because we're creating this new method of engagement, that we have to smooth out all these petty irritations, because any of them along the way could be the reason that someone doesn't want to use Slack anymore. So at Drift, like, we talk about petty irritations a lot, and we came up with this way to push for high standards when it comes to these irritations. We call it the UXU, which is UXU. It stands for User Experience Upgrade. And about a year ago, we were realizing that we had these long backlogs. We called them UX hit lists of things, these little petty irritations that we wanted to fix, but we were struggling to find a way to just justify each one. It's hard to say we should work on realigning this button versus we should develop this new voice feature or something. So we said, like, all right, I think we can figure out a way to do this. So we bought a gift card to a local coffee shop, and we said anyone who fixes one of these, any developer who fixes one of these, will be entered into a raffle for this gift card. And we'll do the drawing on Friday. And the first week we got 2 people that entered, and one person fixed like the alignment of some tabs on our home screen. So it was like this tiny little thing that bugged us forever, but wasn't going to get fixed because, who has the time for that? And then the next week we did the same thing. We said, we'll buy a gift card. And the next week it was 6. And this thing's just been building over time. And actually last week we had the birthday party for the Uxu because we've been doing it for a year. And over the course of the year now, we've fixed around 2,000 of these things. So last week was our biggest week ever because people got excited for the birthday. And we fixed over 100 of these really small inconsistencies in our product. So maybe not the most important thing, but I think the culture that we've been able to create around, paying attention to small things, the craftsmanship. We had this screenshot of one of our salespeople messaging one of the engineers saying, this is probably an Uxu. And we're so excited because I think that was us as a design team creating this culture where even our salespeople are noticing these really small irritations. So we've been really proud of that. Might not be the most important thing we've done, but it really makes us proud. And recently we've been able to use the Uxu process to make changes across the app. So our designer, Christina, just completely revamped the visual style of all of our illustrations. And we used the Uxu process to get people to go change all those illustrations. Again, the type of project that would be hard to prioritize versus a new feature, but we've managed to kind of find a way to use coffee gift cards to get this stuff done.
That's a hackathon, right? Isn't it? Well, since you...
It's kind of...
Since you mentioned your design process, can you share a little bit more about that? How does it look like at Drift?
Yeah, sure. So the way that these customer outcomes get achieved is with teams. So a team is 3 developers, and 2 teams forms a squad, and that's where a designer is embedded with a PM. So we have 1 PM, 1 designer, and what's called a customer advocate. That's the primary point of contact for the customers on that team or on that squad. And those people are all rallied around fixing similar customer problems. So for example, we're a chat product, and so we have 1 squad that works on the chat interface where you can talk to users who are on your visitors who are on your website. So once that team identifies the next customer problem to work on, we call that the job to be done phase. So once we've identified the job to be done, the first thing that we do as a design department is look for role models. So there's a usability law here, Jacob's law, where Jacob Nielsen says that customers spend more time not on your website, or in our case, our application, than on our application or on your website. So the reason that we use role models isn't for to go copy exactly, but it's to figure out what our users' expectations are. So I give this example of if you're building a car, you should probably go look at what's in most cars before you start to design like what the dashboard looks like, and you'll realize, okay, I guess we're going to need a steering wheel and a radio because that's in every car. So it's not to copy exactly, it's to go figure out expectations. So that's step 1 in that process. We find a role model. If there's a clear pattern that's across, for example, every chat interface has a text box at the bottom of the screen, now we know, okay, that's something that our users expect. We probably don't have to go validate that particular part of the process. And the rule that we apply here is called innovate, don't invent. So what it says is if you're going to move that text box from the bottom of the screen someplace else, it better be at least 10 times better in usability than its predecessors, because our users expect it to be there, so it must have to be so much better for it to be to defy their expectations. So innovate, don't invent means that you don't have to invent a new solution that exists, but you can innovate if you have a truly better idea. So we like to start with role models for all sorts of reasons that I just went over. But then the next thing that we do in our process is that I would say is unique is that we are a company that tries to work in public. So this applies all the way throughout Drift, from our presentations to our board members, to our senior leadership team meetings, to our design process, where everything we do, we try to share it with the company to avoid these silos where we're not talking to one another and our work becomes inconsistent. So we have a channel in Slack called Design, and every designer on the team, they're expected to post their work there at least twice a week. And that doesn't necessarily need to be done work. It can be work in progress. And that's kind of our way of scaling a design crit process. So we have a Slack bot that when you post to Design, finds another designer on the team and sends them a private message and says, hey, you're the reviewer of this project. And so then that person is expected to give feedback. And then we do a lot of that feedback through asynchronous video. We use Drift Video. That's a little plug for Drift Video to give feedback, because we think it's a little bit better than text comments, which can be hard to give like kind of context to your feedback, whereas video is a lot nicer and you can convey emotions, as an example. So then our design process ends up being, I think, pretty typical other than those things. So we're very iterative. We try to break down work to as small a chunk as possible. And then, like I said, we try not to consider a product or a project done until we observe a behavior change that we identified in that jobs to be done phase.
Okay, thank you. And my next question would be, how does the research look like in your team, and how do you address issues?
Great. Yes. Like I said, we have a wonderful research department, and she does a bunch of different things to make sure that we get feedback from our users. So we have a survey that goes out every month where we measure the overall usability and effectiveness of Drift. So it's a 4-question survey. The 2 that are most important are overall, how difficult or easy is it to use Drift? And we measure that on a 1 to 5 scale. 1 is extremely difficult, 5 is extremely easy. And we look to keep that average above 4. And then the next question is, how disappointed would you be if you could no longer use Drift? That's called a product market fit question. And there's 3 answers there: not disappointed, somewhat disappointed, or very disappointed. And we measure the percentage of people who answer very disappointed. So we think that for those people, Drift is an important tool in their workflow. And we try to keep that number above 40%. So that's how we're getting feedback on the work that we've done to make sure that it is both delivering results to our customers, so it is achieved product market fit, but also that it's easy to use. So that's one set of research that we do, the survey research. Another set is usability testing. So that's making sure that things that we're either have just launched or are about to launch are easy to use. So we do usability testing. We modeled this off of MailChimp. We bring in user testers every 2 weeks, either into the office or remote. And what our researcher tries to do is make that as easy as possible for the designers to slot research into their process. So instead of the designer requesting to do a usability test, she says, I'm going to be recruiting for a usability test, so you can add your workflows to that test. And we find that's just an easier way to make sure that research is happening all the time, because it can be hard when you're a designer embedded on a team or multiple teams to think, okay, now's the time where I'm going to stop and take the week to go recruit and write the test script and perform the usability test and then react to the results. But it's much easier if there's a researcher that's always bringing in people in, and you know that you can just add tasks to the wiki post and then make sure, or then get feedback on it. So that's on our evaluative side. And then the kind of unfair advantage that we have when it comes to research is that we are a chat product. And so anytime someone's currently using our application, we have the ability to just talk to them. So actually just earlier today, our researcher was launching a chatbot on a particular part of our product, our reporting section. And we know we need feedback because we're iterating on the way reports work. And so she just created a bot that just asked people if they were willing to give us feedback on that. And so it's kind of unfair that we're able to do that so easily, but you can use all sorts of tools to do that, and go proactively reach out to your customers. But yeah, that's kind of how we're doing recruiting for more like problem identification type research.
Okay, thanks. Well, it's easy to you to use Drift, but all the other people can use Drift as well. Why not? Please tell me, I'd like to have a little, history trip now. Have you ever like massively improved the experience of the product with the design? Can you share your greatest success?
Yeah, sure. I hope I have improved the design of some products. So like the most obvious one, the most obvious business result I achieved is I worked at TripAdvisor, like I said, and I worked on emails, but we were in a particularly boring all hands meeting, and I brought my laptop, and I think I was like on some other website and found this pattern that I was like, oh, we should steal that. So I quickly like mocked something up and sent it to the team that worked on the hotels pages. That's where TripAdvisor makes all its money. There was this button at the time called the check rates button. And what that did is it took people who were on TripAdvisor and basically pushed them to a travel agency like Expedia. And so I like redrew that page just in wireframe form, and I sent that to the team. And I didn't hear back for a while, but then I heard that they were working on the idea, which I was excited about. But then I came back to my desk one day, and the CEO had written, we all had whiteboards, and he wrote, I'd never talked to him before. He wrote, great idea. And then he wrote like $3 signs. And I was like, oh, I guess that's pretty cool. But then I found out later that like change to the button made TripAdvisor like $15 million that year or something like that, which felt like really sad that what I got was like this little note from the CEO, but they got $15 million. So that was a fun business result. I'm not sure that was a better user experience. But like back at LogMeIn, which was my last job, it was most of what I was working on was called emerging products. So when we acquired companies, I would help like rework their UI to be more complementary to LogMeIn's suite of products, but also a lot of times we were acquiring products that were really early on in their product development life cycle. So I worked on this password manager, LastPass, and a really well-loved brand, LastPass, but really clunky user experience. So we spent a lot of time. It was a tricky project to work on because people had become so used to the way that LastPass worked, but it was like kind of stalling. It couldn't really cross the chasm from these like really early IT users into like a more mainstream audience. And I'm really proud of the new LastPass experience, which is still rolling out right now, but it's really nice.
Okay, so I'm not a designer, but I imagine being a designer must be like really tricky sometimes and difficult because you probably see a lot of design fuck ups in your daily life. So do you and what do you think? How do you imagine how to fix them?
Yeah, I mean, like even in our work, like I don't know, like so, there's like the classic like there's UI problems. I have my team will tell you this, I have a particular aversion to when people use prime marks instead of apostrophe because my last name is O'Brien and there's an apostrophe there, but because of typewriters, everyone puts a prime mark there. So every time that someone uses a prime mark instead of apostrophe, like I think my hair goes a little grayer. And including like when you log into Netflix and you have multiple accounts, it says who's watching Netflix, and the who's there has a prime mark and not an apostrophe, so that really infuriates me. But on a more like related to our job level, like we just launched a new global navigation in Drift, and it's like less black and white than like this is clearly a fuck up or this is right, but like people react really like extreme on both ends of the emotional scale. Like they'll be extremely angry or extremely pleased. So it can be hard to tell whether or not you've like from a user experience perspective if you've really fucked up. And so what I was talking to the company about was this thing called a J curve, which is when you launch something that you think is better, it's gone through usability testing, like you know that you've worked on it, it's smoother, or it's more performant, you think, that people's satisfaction with it is just going to go up into the right, so that it would look like satisfaction over time is just a straight line up into the right. But in reality, what happens, because people are used to the old way, in this case the old navigation, their satisfaction will dip. So you call that a J curve because it ends up looking like a J if it goes back up into the right. And it can be hard. Like, we're not sure whether or not, or I'm not sure. I was actually losing sleep over this last week, and I probably shouldn't have. But people were reacting to our new navigation. We really like it. We think it's a much better and more scalable way. And the users that we tested with like it. But when some people get it and react, it's hard to tell whether like you're in that kind of change aversion part of the J curve where people are just used to the old way, or if you've actually messed up. So hopefully our next survey will tell us whether or not we've done it. But yeah, it can be hard to know.
Okay, because we're running out of time a little bit. It's a last question from me, and I'm just gonna pick one question from the audience then. So
okay, great.
The ultimate question from me: do you have any simple advice for product makers on how to remove friction from the user experience?
Oh yeah, great. It's a great question. It's like you actually said earlier. So like, design is meant to intentionally solve a problem. So I think, especially early in their career, designers can get into this trap where their solution that they came up with themselves is the right one, and their ego can play into that. So my advice to people who are making products is realize that it's not meant to be, it doesn't need to be from you, your solution. You can steal it from someone else, like I was saying with role model based design. You don't need to both have a more performant solution and it be completely innovative. Really what you're trying to do with design is just solve a customer or user's problems. And if you do that, then you've done design well. Whether or not it was your idea, like, take your ego out of it, allow ideas to come from any place. And so that includes looking at role models that are out there already and not being afraid to copy and use patterns, showing your work really early and often to both your team, but then also to customers, and then not stopping at that you've done something new, but only stopping when you've actually changed behavior in an observable way.
Okay, thank you very much. And one question from the audience. Someone said, I want to know how important is A/B testing during the design process or after the product has been launched?
Yeah, that's a great question. So A/B testing is a tool for figuring out whether or not you think something is better. So it is as important as it needs to be for your project. So what I'd say is that when you are starting off any project or building any product, you need to decide what success looks like. And success can look like that you're going to launch an A/B test and version B needs to win by some observable, the classic A/B test would be some sort of funnel. But it's not the only method to figuring out whether or not what you've done is better. So you can just use time to tell that if you're doing something better. So if you know the time to complete a workflow 1 week, then you launch a change, and then the time goes down the week afterwards. That isn't necessarily an A/B test, but it's an observable change in the behavior that I would consider valid. So it doesn't always have to be an A/B test. It's one really good method of evaluating your success. But we're a B2B company, so a lot of our flows don't have the type of volume where A/B testing is the most efficient way of getting feedback. If you're a consumer company, like when I worked at TripAdvisor, you could A/B test and get your results in 10 seconds. But when you only have in the dozens or hundreds of customers going through a flow any given week or month, you need to be careful how much you rely on A/B testing to get your results, because it can be pretty slow.
Yeah, thank you very much. So sorry that you guys couldn't see Tim's background because it's really interesting. But still, I hope you got a lot of insights. So thank you, Tim.
Thanks so much, Kat.
We're going to take a short break now and move on to Mats and Peder.